My name is Sophia Mitchell, and I'm 27 years old. I never thought my wedding day would become a battlefield between the traditions my immigrant parents held dear and the life I was building with Jason Thompson. When they called my upcoming marriage an embarrassment to the family, something shattered inside me. Their disapproval cast a shadow over what should have been the happiest time of my life. But what happened next? Not even my wildest dreams could have prepared me for the twist that changed everything. If you're watching this video, I'd love to know where you're viewing from. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating the complicated waters of family, love, and cultural expectations. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. Growing up in a household where excellence wasn't just expected but demanded shaped every aspect of my identity. My parents, Anna and Michael Mitchell, left their home country with nothing but 2 suitcases and dreams of providing their future children with opportunities they never had. My father worked 16-hour days at a factory while my mother cleaned houses, both saving every penny possible. Their sacrifice was a story told at every family gathering, a reminder of the debt I could never fully repay. Our modest 2-bedroom apartment was filled with the aroma of traditional cooking and the sound of my parents speaking their native language. English was reserved for school and the outside world. At home, we maintained the customs, celebrated the holidays, and lived by the values of a country I had never visited, but was taught to consider my true home. School became my sanctuary and battlefield simultaneously. I excelled academically, knowing anything less than an A would trigger my father's disappointed sigh. "We didn't come to this country for you to be average," he would say. Those words became my internal compass, guiding me through sleepless nights of studying and weekends spent on extra credit projects while my American friends enjoyed sleepovers and mall trips. College brought the first taste of freedom. Moving into a dorm room 2 hours away from home felt like crossing an ocean. I could choose my schedule, my friends, and even what to eat without consideration of tradition. Yet guilt followed me like a shadow. Each new American habit I adopted felt like a small betrayal of my heritage. I started living in 2 worlds, calling home every Sunday to speak in my parents' language and discuss traditional topics, while building a separate life filled with new experiences they wouldn't understand or approve of. After graduation, I secured a job at a marketing firm in the city. My parents bragged about my degree and career to relatives, but questioned my decision to live alone in an apartment instead of returning home until marriage. "Good daughters stay with family," my mother would remind me during our weekly calls. I would nod through the video chat while sitting in an apartment decorated in a style that would make her frown. Then came the charity event that changed everything. My firm had volunteered to handle marketing for a fundraiser benefiting education in developing countries. The cause resonated with me, reminding me of the opportunities my parents had sought. I was reviewing the event setup when Jason Thompson, the fundraiser coordinator, approached me about a last-minute change to the presentation materials. Jason stood out immediately, not just because of his tall frame and warm smile, but because of the passionate way he spoke about the cause. "Education changed my family's trajectory," he explained. "My grandparents never made it past 8th grade, but they made sure my mom went to college. Now I'm trying to pay that forward." In his words, I heard echoes of my own family's journey, though his laid-back demeanor and easy laugh contrasted sharply with my parents' serious approach to life. We exchanged numbers for professional reasons, but soon our texts shifted from work topics to personal conversations. Our first date wasn't planned as such. We both stayed after the successful fundraiser to help clean up, then found ourselves hungry and alone at midnight, sharing fries at the only diner still open. I learned that Jason came from a typically American family in Ohio, with parents who encouraged him to find his passion rather than follow a prescribed path. The freedom in his upbringing both fascinated and slightly unsettled me. Dating Jason brought challenges I hadn't anticipated. He couldn't understand why I needed to lie to my parents about where I was spending my weekends or why meeting them was out of the question for the first 6 months. "They're not ready," was all I could explain, while thinking about the inevitable disappointment they would express at my choice of an American boyfriend with no connection to our culture. But Jason proved remarkably patient and genuinely interested in understanding my background. He asked me to teach him basic phrases in my parents' language, researched our traditional holidays, and even learned to cook a simplified version of my favorite childhood dish. "I might not get it all right," he said while presenting his slightly imperfect creation, "but I want to know the things that made you who you are." After 2 years together, I finally gathered the courage to introduce Jason to my parents. The dinner was tense, with my father asking pointed questions about Jason's family, education, and career plans. My mother remained mostly silent, serving food and watching with cautious eyes. Jason maintained his composure, answering respectfully and even attempting a few phrases in their language. They didn't exactly warm to him, but they didn't reject him outright, which I counted as a small victory. The proposal came a year later, on a crisp fall evening at the Botanical Gardens. Jason had arranged a private tour that culminated in the cultural display featuring plants from my parents' homeland. There, surrounded by familiar flowers my mother had always tried to grow in our apartment windowsill, he knelt and presented a ring. "I want to build a life that honors where both of us come from while creating something new together," he said. Through tears, I accepted. That night, staring at the ring on my finger, I felt both elation and dread. The man I loved had proposed in a way that thoughtfully acknowledged my heritage. Now I just had to tell my parents I intended to marry someone they had merely tolerated during 3 uncomfortable family dinners. I rehearsed the conversation for days, plotting the perfect time and crafting the perfect words that would help them see Jason as I did. I chose a Sunday dinner at their home, hoping the familiar setting would soften the news. I brought Jason's mother's homemade apple pie as a peace offering, trying to demonstrate how our families could share traditions. As we ate my mother's carefully prepared traditional meal, I spoke of my future plans, strategically emphasizing Jason's stable job, his respect for family values, and his interest in our culture. For a moment, as my parents nodded along, I allowed myself to hope this might be easier than expected. That hope evaporated in an instant when I finally said the words, "Jason has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes." The silence that followed felt eternal, broken only by the sound of my father's fork clattering against his plate. "Absolutely not." My father's voice was low but firm, a tone I recognized from childhood as non-negotiable. He looked not at me but at the wall behind me, as if he couldn't bear to meet my eyes. "This is not the plan we had for you." "Dad, please," I started, but he cut me off with a raised hand. "We have been patient with this relationship." He struggled to find the right word, settling on one that minimized the 2-year connection Jason and I had built. "We thought you would come to your senses. Find someone from our community, someone who understands our ways." My mother, usually the mediator, remained uncharacteristically silent, staring down at her half-eaten dinner. When she finally spoke, her words stunned me more than my father's outright rejection. "What will people say, Sophia? Have you thought about that? Our family back home, our friends here, our community at the cultural center." She shook her head, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "They will talk. They will say we failed as parents, that we allowed our daughter to become too American." "This isn't about other people," I insisted, feeling my carefully rehearsed speech crumbling. "This is about Jason and me, our happiness, our future." My father scoffed. "Marriage has never been just about 2 people. It is about families joining, traditions continuing, children being raised properly." He pushed his plate away. "This wedding you're planning, it would be an embarrassment to this family." The words sliced through me like a physical pain. Embarrassment. All my life, I had worked to make my parents proud, to be the daughter they sacrificed everything for. Now my happiness was an embarrassment to them. "Jason is a good man," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "He respects you both. He's trying to learn about our culture. He supports my career and my connections to our heritage." "He will never understand," my father insisted. "And your children? They will be strangers to our ways, not knowing who they truly are." "They'll know both sides of their heritage," I countered, speaking with more confidence than I felt. "Jason and I have already talked about raising them with awareness of both cultures." My mother reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. For a moment, I thought she was offering support, but her words proved otherwise. Sophia, darling, mixed marriages are so difficult. The novelty wears off, and then you're left with someone who can never truly understand your heart. Is that what you want for yourself? For your children? I pulled my hand away, feeling a new emotion rising through the hurt, anger. What I want is for my parents to trust that they raised me well enough to make my own decisions. To be happy that I've found someone who treats me with respect and love. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. If you choose this path, you choose it without our blessing. For the first time in my life, I didn't back down from my father's ultimatum. Then that's what I'll have to do. I stood as well, gathering my purse and the untouched apple pie. I love you both, but I love Jason too. I won't choose between you. The drive home passed in a blur of tears. I called Jason from the parking lot of my apartment building, unable to go inside alone with the weight of what had just happened. He arrived 20 minutes later, holding me as I recounted the devastating dinner. We knew this might happen, he said gently, stroking my hair. But they might come around, given time. You don't know them like I do, I replied. Once my father makes up his mind, it's set in stone. The following weeks proved me right. My calls went unanswered. Texts received brief, formal responses, if any. When I dropped by their apartment unannounced, my mother opened the door but wouldn't let me in, saying my father wasn't ready to talk. She hugged me quickly before sending me away, her eyes darting nervously toward the interior of the apartment as if afraid he would catch her showing affection. The contrast with Jason's family couldn't have been more stark. When we told his parents about the engagement, his mother Caroline had burst into tears of joy before pulling me into a crushing hug. Welcome to the family, sweetheart, she'd said. His father Robert had clapped Jason on the back before embracing me as well. About time, he joked. We were starting to think he'd never work up the courage to ask you. Jason's sister Natalie immediately started a group text with wedding planning ideas, adding me to her Pinterest boards filled with ceremony inspiration. Their unconditional acceptance made my parents' rejection even more painful. In a desperate attempt to bridge the gap, I arranged a dinner between both families. Just give them a chance to get to know each other, I pleaded with my parents over voicemail. See how Jason's family respects our traditions. To my surprise, they agreed. The dinner was set for a Saturday evening at a neutral location, a private room at a restaurant that served cuisine from my parents' homeland. I spent hours briefing Jason's family on cultural etiquette and topics to avoid, while simultaneously begging my parents to approach the evening with an open mind. From the moment they arrived, 10 minutes apart, the tension was palpable. My father shook hands stiffly with Robert, barely acknowledging Caroline's warm greeting. My mother made a visible effort, complimenting Caroline's dress and asking about her work as a high school teacher. The first course arrived with conversation still stilted. Jason's father, trying to break the ice, mentioned how much he enjoyed trying the traditional dishes I had introduced to their family gatherings. Sophia was always an excellent cook, my mother offered, the first positive note of the evening. I taught her from when she was very small. Caroline smiled warmly. She's been teaching Jason too. Last week they made some kind of pastry that I couldn't pronounce, but couldn't stop eating. Instead of appreciating this point of connection, my father frowned. Our food is not a novelty to be sampled, he said coldly. These recipes have been in our family for generations. Robert, sensing the sudden chill, tried to redirect. That's what makes them special. We'd love to learn more about your family traditions. After all, we're going to be family soon too. That remains to be seen, my father replied. The comment hung in the air like a thundercloud. Jason reached for my hand under the table as I fought back tears. The remainder of the dinner proceeded with painful small talk interrupted by long silences. When dessert was finally served, my father checked his watch and announced they needed to leave. In the parking lot, Caroline attempted one final connection, approaching my mother with genuine warmth. I know this is difficult, but I want you to know we'll make sure your traditions are honored in the wedding and in Sophia and Jason's life together. My mother nodded politely, but said nothing. My father, overhearing, turned to me with cold fury in his eyes. There will be no honoring of traditions in a ceremony we cannot support. He took my mother's arm. Let's go. As their car pulled away, I collapsed against Jason, the full weight of their rejection crushing me anew. His parents surrounded us in a group hug, their support both comforting and a painful reminder of what my own parents were withholding. They'll come around, Robert said, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed his doubt. Back home that night, Jason held me as I cycled through grief, anger, and determination. We're still getting married, I finally said, wiping away tears. With or without them. Are you sure? Jason asked, his concern evident. I don't want to be what comes between you and your family. You're not doing this, I said firmly. This is their choice. And I've made mine. As wedding planning began in earnest, the silence from my parents grew into a physical ache I carried daily. Each decision, venue, flowers, food, felt incomplete without my mother's input. Each night I fell asleep wondering if tomorrow would be the day they would call, saying they had reconsidered. That call never came. The bridal boutique sparkled with promise as my future mother-in-law Caroline, Jason's sister Natalie, and my two closest friends gathered around me. The consultant brought gown after gown, each one more beautiful than the last. Under different circumstances, this would have been a day of pure joy. What do you think of this one? I asked, twirling in a delicate A-line dress with lace detailing. It's stunning, Caroline said, her eyes misty. Your mom would love it, my friend Amy added, then immediately clamped her hand over her mouth. I'm so sorry, I wasn't thinking. I forced a smile. It's okay. But it wasn't. My mother should have been here, fussing over the fabric, insisting on seeing every option before making a decision. Instead, I had left my 12th voicemail this month, describing wedding plans that received no response. The weekly calls had become a ritual of disappointment. Hi Mom, it's me again. We've settled on a date in June. I'd really love your input on the ceremony. Each message ended with the same plea, please call me back. They never did. The wedding invitations presented another painful decision. Do we send one to your parents? Jason asked gently as we reviewed the guest list in our apartment. Of course, I said without hesitation. They're my parents. The elegant cream envelope containing my parents' invitation felt heavier than the others as I dropped the stack at the post office. 3 days later, it appeared back in our mailbox unopened, with return to sender written in my father's unmistakable handwriting. I stared at the rejected invitation until Jason gently took it from my trembling hands. I'm so sorry, sophomore. That night, I sobbed in the shower where Jason couldn't hear me, mourning the wedding day I had always imagined, my father walking me down the aisle, my mother helping adjust my veil in the final moments before the ceremony. A surprising lifeline appeared the following week. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number that turned out to be my Aunt Lydia, my mother's younger sister. Sophia, darling, she whispered into the phone. I can't talk long. Your mother doesn't know I'm calling. My heart raced. Is everything okay? Are they okay? They're fine, just stubborn and proud. She sighed. I wanted you to know that not everyone in the family agrees with them. I've seen the photos of Jason you posted online. He looks like a good man. Tears welled up. He is, Aunt Lydia. He really is. I know, sweetheart. And I want to help with your wedding if you'll let me. I can't come. Your parents would never forgive me, but I can send you something. A week later, a package arrived containing my grandmother's hand-embroidered table runner. For your head table, Aunt Lydia's note read, something from your heritage to bless your new beginning. Your grandmother would have wanted you to have it. The unexpected support gave me courage to continue incorporating cultural elements into our wedding plans. I found a baker who could recreate the traditional wedding bread my culture served for good fortune. I selected music that would honor both Jason's American upbringing and my dual heritage. Each choice felt like building a bridge my parents refused to cross. Jason, true to his word, threw himself into learning more about my culture. He practiced phrases with an online tutor, researched traditional wedding customs, and even suggested ways to incorporate meaningful symbols into our ceremony. I want your whole self represented, he insisted, even the parts your parents think I'm taking away. His family proved equally supportive. Caroline helped me adapt traditional recipes for the reception menu. Robert learned about cultural wedding traditions to honor during his father of the groom speech. Natalie found a seamstress who could add traditional embroidery patterns to my otherwise modern wedding dress. Their efforts touched me deeply while simultaneously highlighting the absence of my own family. One Sunday afternoon, while gathering photos for a reception display, I came across an image of my parents on their own wedding day. My mother, radiant in her traditional attire. My father, proud and tall beside her. They looked so happy, so full of hope for their future together. What had happened to those two young people who once faced their own unknown future with courage? The universe offered an unexpected chance to find out. While picking up coffee at the shop near my office, I literally bumped into my father, spilling his drink all over both of us. "I'm so sorry, Dad." The shock of seeing him rendered me momentarily speechless. He looked equally startled, frozen in place as the barista rushed over with napkins. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of his old affection before his expression hardened again. "Sophia." He nodded formally while dabbing at his stained shirt. "Please, let me buy you another coffee," I said quickly, desperate to prolong the encounter. "We could sit for a minute?" He hesitated, and hope fluttered in my chest. Then he shook his head. "I have an appointment." "Dad, please. 5 minutes? I'm getting married in 3 weeks. I just want—" "I know when you're getting married," he interrupted, his voice low. "Your mother cries about it every night." The revelation stunned me. If it upsets her so much, why won't she talk to me? Why won't either of you just talk to me? What is there to say? You've made your choice. He straightened his jacket. We did not raise you to abandon your heritage. I'm not abandoning anything. Jason and I are incorporating traditions from both our backgrounds. You'd know that if you returned any of my calls. His expression didn't soften. Half measures and tourist attractions. That's what our culture becomes in this arrangement. That's not fair. You haven't even tried to. I have to go. He stepped around me, then paused. Almost without turning, he added, "Your mother wanted me to ask if you're wearing her necklace. The one from your grandmother." The question caught me off guard. I was hoping to, but I thought she would want you to have it. He walked away without another word, leaving me standing amid coffee shop patrons pretending not to watch our exchange. That night, I recounted the strange encounter to Jason. "I don't understand," I said, pacing our living room. "He can barely look at me, but he asks about grandmother's necklace?" Jason considered this. "Maybe it's their way of giving some kind of blessing without actually saying it?" I shook my head. "You don't know my father. If he wanted to give a blessing, he'd find a way that makes his authority clear." I sank onto the couch. 3 weeks until the wedding, and I'm still hoping for a miracle that isn't coming. Jason sat beside me, taking my hands in his. "Whatever happens, we're building something beautiful together. Your parents may not see it now, but someday they might. And if they don't? Then it's their loss," he said simply. "But our door will always be open when they're ready." I leaned against his shoulder, drawing strength from his steady presence. The wedding would proceed in 3 weeks with or without my parents. I had to accept that reality while somehow keeping my heart open to the family who had shaped me, even as they broke my heart. The final weeks of preparation passed in a blur of vendor confirmations, last-minute adjustments, and the arrival of out-of-town guests. Jason's extended family embraced me warmly, his grandmother insisting on teaching me her secret recipe for apple pie, "Now that you'll be a Thompson too." Their acceptance soothed the raw edges of my parents' rejection, even as it highlighted the contrast between our families. The night before the wedding, a small package arrived by courier. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay my grandmother's necklace, a delicate gold chain with a small pendant inscribed with an ancient symbol for prosperity. There was no note, no explanation. Just the precious heirloom my mother had promised would one day be mine. I held it to my chest, tears flowing freely. It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance, but it was something. A thread still connecting me to my family, even as I prepared to start a new one. As I drifted off to sleep in the hotel room I was sharing with my bridesmaids, I allowed myself one last hope that tomorrow might bring the miracle I'd been praying for. The call came at 5:47 a.m., jarring me from restless sleep the morning of my wedding day. My Aunt Lydia's panicked voice cut through my groggy confusion. "Sophia, it's your grandmother. She's in the hospital. They're saying it might be a stroke." I sat bolt upright, instantly alert. "Which hospital? Is she okay?" "Memorial General. Your parents are already here." Her voice dropped. "Sophia, it's serious. The doctors aren't making any promises." My grandmother, the family matriarch who had emigrated first, paving the way for her children to follow. The woman who had taught me to make dumplings while telling stories of the old country. The keeper of our family history. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, already searching for clothes. My bridesmaids stirred at the commotion. "What's happening?" Amy asked, concern etched on her face. "Family emergency. I have to go to the hospital." I pulled on jeans and a sweater, my mind racing. "The hair and makeup people are coming at 10. If I'm not back." I couldn't finish the thought. "Don't worry about any of that," Amy insisted. "Just go. We'll handle everything here." The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before me as I followed signs to the intensive care unit. My stomach knotted at the thought of seeing my parents for the first time in months under these circumstances. Would they even acknowledge me? Ask me to leave? I rounded the corner and saw them immediately, my mother slumped in a chair, my father standing stiffly beside her, his hand on her shoulder. They looked older somehow, worn down by worry. My mother noticed me first, her red-rimmed eyes widening. "Sophia," she whispered, as if saying my name might break something fragile in the air between us. My father turned, his expression unreadable. For a moment, no one moved. Then my mother rose and crossed to me, her arms opening hesitantly. I stepped into her embrace, inhaling her familiar scent of rosewater and home. "How is she?" I asked when we finally separated. "Stable for now," my father answered, his voice rough with fatigue. "The doctor says the next 24 hours are critical." 24 hours. My wedding was in 8. "Can I see her?" My mother nodded. "She's been asking for you." They led me to a private room where my grandmother lay connected to monitors that beeped steadily. Her small frame seemed lost among the hospital sheets. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. "Grandma?" I approached cautiously, taking her papery hand in mine. "It's Sophia." Her eyelids fluttered, then opened. Recognition dawned slowly, followed by a weak smile. "My Sophia," she whispered in our native language. "The bride." Tears threatened as I nodded. "Yes, Grandma. Today's the wedding." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "You will still marry. Promise me." "Grandma, I don't know if." "Promise." Her gaze was suddenly fierce. "Joy does not wait for sorrow to finish." My mother made a small sound behind me, something between a sob and a protest. My grandmother's eyes shifted to her daughter. "Anna," she called. "Come here. Both of you." My parents approached the bed hesitantly. My grandmother looked between them, then fixed her gaze on my father. "Michael," she said, using his American name, which she rarely did. "Tell me why you refused to attend your daughter's wedding." My father stiffened. "Mother, this isn't the time." "When better," she interrupted. "When I am dead. Then you will have no one to answer to but yourself." She turned to me. "Leave us, Sophia. I must speak with your parents alone." Reluctantly, I stepped into the hallway, where Aunt Lydia waited. "What's happening?" she asked. "Grandma's giving them a talking to, I think." Despite everything, I almost smiled. Even bedridden, my grandmother remained a force of nature. Time stretched as I waited, torn between the crisis unfolding at the hospital and the wedding preparations proceeding across town. I called Jason, explaining the situation in a hushed voice. "Do what you need to do," he said without hesitation. "If we need to postpone, we will." "No," I said firmly, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. "Joy does not wait for sorrow to finish. We're getting married today, even if it's just you and me in the hospital chapel." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." After nearly an hour, the door to my grandmother's room opened. My mother emerged first, her eyes downcast, but no longer tearful. My father followed, his face a complex mask of emotions I couldn't quite read. "She wants to see you again," my mother said softly. "Alone this time." I re-entered the room to find my grandmother looking exhausted, but somehow satisfied. She patted the edge of the bed, indicating I should sit. "My Sophia," she began, reverting to our native language. "So beautiful, so stubborn. Like your father." She smiled weakly. "He thinks you are abandoning our ways." I told him he is a fool. "Grandma." She raised a hand to silence me. "Listen now. I have little strength." She took a labored breath. "Did they ever tell you how your parents met?" I shook my head, surprised by the question. "Your father was studying engineering. Your mother worked in the university library. He saw her and decided immediately she would be his wife." A smile ghosted across her lips. "But your grandfather and I forbade it." "What?" "Why? Her family was from the southern province. Different dialect, different customs. Not suitable, we said." She coughed, and I quickly offered her water. After sipping slowly, she continued. "They married anyway. Without our blessing." The revelation stunned me. My parents had always presented their marriage as traditionally arranged and approved. "Your grandfather refused to attend the wedding." I went in secret. Her eyes twinkled with the memory. "I wore a headscarf so no one would recognize me. But when I saw your mother walking toward my son, looking at him with such love, I knew we had been wrong." "What happened then?" 2 years of silence. "Until you were born." She squeezed my hand. "They brought you to meet us when you were 1 week old. Your grandfather took one look at your perfect face and forgot he had ever objected." Tears slid down my cheeks as pieces of my family history rearranged themselves. "Why didn't they ever tell me?" "Shame, perhaps. Or not wanting you to know they had defied tradition." She gazed at me intently. "You're Jason. He is a good man. The best I've ever known. He respects where you come from, who you are. More than I sometimes do myself," I admitted. She nodded, satisfied. "Then bring him to me. Before the wedding. I want to meet the man brave enough to enter our complicated family." "Grandma," the doctor said, "I have lived 82 years. I will decide what matters now." Her tone brooked no argument. "Bring him today. Then go and be married." "And my parents?" She closed her eyes briefly. "They must find their own way, as you have found yours. As they once found theirs." She touched my cheek. "The necklace. You received it." I nodded. "It came last night. No note. Your mother polished it herself." She smiled faintly. "The first step is always the hardest." I left the hospital with a promise to return with Jason in a few hours. My mind reeled with revelations about my parents' own rebellion against tradition, the very thing they now condemned me for. Had they forgotten their own journey? Or were they trying to spare me from the pain they had endured? Back at the hotel, wedding preparations were in full swing. My bridesmaids had handled the arriving hair and makeup artists, steamed my dress, and fielded calls from vendors. I shared a condensed version of the morning's events as stylists transformed my appearance into that of a bride. "So your grandmother wants to meet Jason before the ceremony?" Amy clarified as the makeup artist applied my foundation. "Yes. And somehow I need to get into my dress, go to the hospital, then make it to the venue on time." The impossibility of the schedule threatened to overwhelm me. "We'll make it work," Amy declared, already texting the wedding planner to rearrange the timeline. Jason arrived at the hotel looking handsome in his tuxedo, concern etched on his face. "How are you holding up?" "Honestly, I don't know." I explained my grandmother's revelations about my parents' marriage. "All this time, they've been condemning us for something they did themselves." "People often fight hardest against seeing their own reflection," Jason said thoughtfully. "Maybe facing their past through you is too painful." In the hospital parking lot, I paused before exiting the car, suddenly aware of how bizarre this detour must seem. "I'm sorry our wedding day includes a hospital visit." Jason took my hands. "Sophia, today is about beginning our life together. That includes all the complicated, messy parts of family." He smiled. "Besides, I want to thank your grandmother for creating half of the amazing woman I'm about to marry." The hospital corridors felt different with Jason beside me, his calm presence steadying my nerves. Outside my grandmother's room, we encountered my parents, who froze at the sight of us in our wedding attire. My mother recovered first, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. Sophia, she whispered. You look beautiful, my father finished unexpectedly, his voice rough. An awkward silence fell. Jason stepped forward, extending his hand to my father. Mr. Mitchell, thank you for raising such an incredible daughter. My father stared at the offered hand for a long moment before accepting it with a stiff nod. Not exactly warm, but not a rejection either. Is Grandma awake? I asked, desperate to move past the tension. Yes, my mother answered. She's been watching the clock, waiting for you. They stepped aside to let us enter. My grandmother's face lit up at the sight of us, her smile the brightest thing in the sterile room. Ah, here they are. The beautiful couple. She beckoned Jason closer. Let me see the man who has stolen my granddaughter's heart. Jason approached respectfully, taking her fragile hand in his. It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Mitchell. Sophia has told me so much about you. Has she told you I am stubborn? That I speak my mind? Her eyes twinkled. She mentioned you're the family truth teller, Jason replied with a smile. Good. Then you will believe me when I say this. She held his gaze intently. Marriage is never easy. Two people from the same village, same family, same traditions. Still they must work every day to understand each other. You and Sophia, you have a bigger mountain to climb. I know, Jason said seriously. But I believe what's on the other side is worth it. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded approvingly. You will need patience. And a sense of humor. My granddaughter is more like her father than she knows. Grandma, I protested, blushing. She ignored me, focusing on Jason. Do you promise to remember that even when she pushes you away, she is really asking you to try harder to understand? I promise, he said solemnly. And do you promise to teach your children about both sides of their heritage? The stories, the language, the traditions. With your help, Jason answered, I hope to learn those stories myself, so I can share them too. My grandmother's eyes filled with tears. Good answer. She reached for my hand, bringing it together with Jason's. Now, I give you my blessing. Go and be married. Be happy. Fight well and make up better. I leaned down to kiss her cheek. I wish you could be there. I will be, she assured me. In here. She tapped my heart. Now go. Your future is waiting, and I need to speak with your parents again. As we turned to leave, my grandmother called out, Jason. Take care of our Sophia. Every day of my life, he promised. In the hallway, my parents stood awkwardly, clearly unsure of the protocol for this unusual situation. I hesitated, then stepped toward them. We're heading to the ceremony now, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The invitation still stands. If you want to come. My father cut me off. We have to stay with your grandmother. I nodded, swallowing disappointment. I understand. I just wanted you to know you're still welcome. As Jason and I walked away, I heard my grandmother's voice ring out from her hospital room. Michael. Anna. Get in here now. Despite everything, I smiled. Whatever she had to say, I knew they would listen. Whether it would change anything remained to be seen. The bridal suite buzzed with activity as my bridesmaids helped adjust my veil. Through the window, I could see guests arriving at the garden venue, a beautiful blend of traditions already visible in the decorations. White garden roses mingled with vibrant flowers from my parents' homeland. The traditional American white runner was bordered with patterns inspired by my cultural heritage. How are you feeling? Amy asked, smoothing a wrinkle from my dress. Like I'm living in a parallel universe, I admitted. This morning I was in a hospital room with my grandmother, who might not survive the week. Now I'm about to walk down the aisle. Your grandmother was right, Amy said gently. Joy doesn't wait for sorrow to finish. Sometimes they hold hands. Caroline knocked softly before entering, looking elegant in her blue mother-of-the-groom dress. Oh, Sophia, she breathed. You're absolutely radiant. I smiled, grateful for her presence while still feeling the absence of my own mother acutely. Caroline seemed to read my thoughts. I brought something, she said, opening her clutch. It's a bracelet my mother wore at her wedding, and I wore at mine. Something borrowed, if you'd like. The delicate silver bracelet glittered as she fastened it around my wrist. Thank you, I whispered, touched by the gesture. For everything. You've been so welcoming from the beginning. That's what family does, she said simply, squeezing my hands. And your family now. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. The wedding planner poked her head in. 15 minutes, ladies. Groom is in position, guests are seated. As my bridesmaids made final adjustments to their dresses, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Aunt Lydia. My heart stopped. Was it news about my grandmother? Hello. I answered, stepping away from the others. Sophia. Aunt Lydia's voice was tight with emotion. Your grandmother's condition has worsened. The doctors don't think. She paused. They're saying it might be a matter of hours. The room seemed to tilt around me. I'll come right away. No, Aunt Lydia interrupted firmly. She specifically said you are not to cancel the wedding. Those were her exact words. But if these are her last hours, she insists this is what she wants. For you to be married as planned. Her voice softened. She also told me to make sure you wear her necklace. I touched the pendant at my throat, tears threatening to ruin my carefully applied makeup. I'm wearing it. Good. She'll be happy to know that. Aunt Lydia hesitated. There's something else. She asked me to send something with your parents, but they're not coming, I finished, the familiar ache returning. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. After we hung up, I stood frozen, torn between worlds. The wedding I had planned for months was minutes away. My beloved grandmother was possibly taking her last breaths across town. And my parents remained absent, their seats in the front row destined to remain empty. A soft knock broke my reverie. The wedding planner again. Sophia? It's time to line up. I nodded, taking a deep breath and smoothing my dress. This was still my wedding day. Jason was waiting. Our future was beginning, even as a piece of my past was possibly ending. The bridesmaids filed out, leaving me alone for a final moment. I looked in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me in her white gown and carefully arranged hair. I touched my grandmother's necklace, drawing strength from the connection to my heritage it represented. Okay, I whispered to my reflection. Let's do this. The wedding coordinator guided me to the garden entrance where the procession would begin. Through an archway, I could see the rows of guests, the flower-adorned altar, and Jason standing tall and handsome, waiting for me. My heart swelled with love even as it ached with absence. The music changed, my cue to begin walking. With no father to escort me, I had decided to make the journey alone. A statement of independence, I had told myself when making the decision. Now it felt like a symbol of loss. I took my first step onto the petal-strewn aisle, forcing a smile as guests rose to their feet. Everyone's eyes were on me, expressions of joy and admiration on their faces. I focused on Jason, his loving gaze pulling me forward when my steps wanted to falter. Halfway down the aisle, a commotion at the back of the garden caught my attention. Guests turned, murmuring. Thinking perhaps someone had arrived late, I continued walking, determined not to be distracted. Then I heard it, my name, spoken in my father's distinctive voice. Sophia. I turned, unable to believe my ears. There, at the garden entrance, stood my father dressed in his best suit, the traditional formal attire from our homeland. Beside him, my mother wiped tears from her eyes, resplendent in a dress that perfectly complemented the wedding colors. The music continued playing as I stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, unable to process what I was seeing. My father approached slowly, his expression a complex mixture of emotions. May I? He asked softly, offering his arm in the traditional way. Words failed me. I nodded, hardly daring to believe this was real. As he took his place beside me, he leaned close. Your grandmother can be very persuasive, he whispered. And very wise. Tears threatened again as we resumed the walk toward Jason, who was beaming with understanding. My mother slipped quickly into the front row seat that had been reserved for my parents, dabbing at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. When we reached the altar, the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" My father's voice was steady as he answered, "Her mother, and I do." He placed my hand in Jason's, then added something unexpected in our native language, the traditional blessing I had never dared hope to hear. The ceremony proceeded like a dream. Jason and I exchanged vows we had written ourselves, promising to honor each other's heritage and build a life that celebrated both. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the garden erupted in applause that seemed to bridge cultures, generations, and misunderstandings. At the reception, my father approached while Jason was busy greeting guests. "I owe you an explanation," he said quietly. "What happened?" I asked, still overwhelmed by their sudden appearance. "Your grandmother happened." He smiled faintly. "After you left, she reminded us of our own wedding day. How her disapproval nearly cost her a relationship with you." His eyes grew distant. "She said she would not allow us to make the same mistake." "Just like that, you changed your mind?" "Not just like that, no." He looked down. "We've been struggling with this for months. Your mother more than me, perhaps." He met my gaze directly. "When your grandmother's condition worsened this morning, she made us promise. She said life is too short for such stubbornness. That sometimes traditions must bend so families don't break." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "And you agreed?" We remembered how it felt to be young and in love, facing disapproval from those whose opinions mattered most. He hesitated. "I still have concerns, Sophia. Cultural differences in marriage are not easy to navigate. But—" He glanced across the room at Jason, who was laughing with an elderly relative. "He seems to be a good man who truly loves you. That is the foundation everything else can be built upon." Before I could respond, the wedding planner announced it was time for the first dance. Jason appeared at my side, politely acknowledging my father before leading me to the dance floor. "Your parents," he whispered as we began to sway to the music. "I can't believe they're here." "Grandma's doing," I explained, still processing everything myself. "Apparently she gave them an ultimatum from her hospital bed." Jason smiled. "Remind me never to cross your grandmother." "If we have a daughter someday, I hope she has Grandma's spirit," I said, then realized what I'd implied. "I mean, I hope so too," Jason said simply, pulling me closer. As the reception continued, my mother approached cautiously during the dinner service. "The ceremony was beautiful," she offered. "So many thoughtful touches from our culture." "Jason researched everything himself," I told her. "He wanted to honor where I come from." She nodded, seeming to struggle with what to say next. "Your grandmother asked me to give you something." She reached into her small purse and withdrew an envelope. "She wrote this for you last night. She said it should be read during the reception." I accepted the envelope with trembling hands. "How is she?" "Holding on." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "She's determined to hear all about the wedding tomorrow." The envelope contained a single sheet of paper covered in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. Jason leaned close as I unfolded it, his arm supportive around my waist. "Should I read it?" I asked the wedding planner, who had appeared at my elbow. She nodded. "I'll have the DJ lower the music." As the room quieted, I stepped to the microphone, Jason by my side. "My grandmother couldn't be here today," I explained, my voice wavering slightly. "But she sent this letter to be read." I took a deep breath and began to read. "My dearest Sophia and Jason, today you begin a journey that will require courage, patience, and above all, love. Marriage is never simple, even when two people share the same history. When you come from different worlds, you must work harder to understand each other's hearts. Sophia, remember that the traditions we hold dear are not meant to be prison walls, but foundations from which to grow. Your heritage is not something you leave behind, but something you bring with you, sharing its beauty with those you love. Jason, in welcoming Sophia, you welcome all that made her who she is, her history, her culture, her family with all our complications. Learn our stories. They are becoming part of your story now too. Together, you have the rare opportunity to build something new, a bridge between worlds, a family that honors multiple traditions while creating your own. This is not a betrayal of the past, but a gift to the future. To those who feared this union would diminish our cultural heritage, I say this: love never diminishes, it only multiplies. Each generation must find its own way to carry forward what matters most. May your home be filled with laughter in many languages. May your table welcome all who come in peace. May your children know the richness of their dual heritage. And may you always remember that the most important tradition of all is love. With all my heart. Your grandmother. By the time I finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. My parents stood together near the back, my father's arm around my mother's shoulders. Something had shifted, not a complete transformation, but a beginning. The DJ gently resumed the music as Jason pulled me close. Your grandmother should write greeting cards, he said, making me laugh through my tears. She always knows exactly what to say, I agreed. Always has. Later, during the traditional father-daughter dance that I had assumed would be skipped, my father approached hesitantly. May I? He asked for the second time that day. As we moved somewhat awkwardly to the music, he said, Your grandmother's letter. She has always been wiser than the rest of us. She's had more practice, I offered with a small smile. Sophia. He stopped dancing, looking directly at me. I want you to know something. Even when I disapproved of your choices, I never stopped loving you. Not for one moment. The simple statement unlocked something that had been tightly bound inside me. I never stopped loving you either, Dad. He nodded, emotion making further words impossible. We resumed dancing, no longer needing to speak. The reception continued into the night, transforming from a celebration shadowed by absence to one brightened by unexpected reconciliation. My mother eventually relaxed enough to teach Jason's relatives a traditional dance from our homeland. Jason's father engaged my father in conversation that gradually shifted from polite small talk to genuine interest. Two families, hesitantly beginning to become one. As Jason and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, my phone rang once more. Aunt Lydia again. Grandma? I asked immediately, fearing the worst. Her condition has stabilized, Aunt Lydia said, her voice reflecting cautious optimism. The doctors are surprised. She's asking about the wedding. Relief flooded through me. Tell her it was perfect. Absolutely perfect. I will. Oh, and Sophia? Your mother just called to say they're coming straight to the hospital from the reception. Together. I caught my breath, understanding the significance. My parents, continuing the process of reconciliation even after the wedding was over. Thank you, Aunt Lydia, for everything. As we drove away amid a shower of flower petals, Jason reached for my hand. So, he said with a smile, not exactly the wedding day we planned. No, I agreed, thinking of hospital rooms and family secrets, unexpected appearances and grandmother's wisdom. It was infinitely better. The garden pathway seemed impossibly long as I began my solitary walk toward Jason. Each step felt weighted with emotions, joy at marrying the man I loved, sorrow at the absence of my family, worry for my grandmother lying in a hospital bed across town. The guests rose as the music swelled, their faces blurring through the veil covering my eyes. I focused on Jason waiting at the altar, his encouraging smile pulling me forward when my steps wanted to falter. This was still our day. Our beginning. I straightened my shoulders and continued walking, trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. Halfway down the aisle, a commotion at the back of the venue caught my attention. Whispers rippled through the crowd as heads turned toward the garden entrance. Thinking perhaps a late guest had arrived, I continued my careful progress, determined to maintain my composure. Then I heard it, my name, called in my father's distinctive voice. Sophia. I turned, heart racing, unable to believe my ears. There at the garden entrance stood my father, dressed in his finest suit with traditional embellishments from our homeland. His face held a complexity of emotions I couldn't fully decipher from a distance. The music continued playing as I stood frozen, unsure what was happening. My father approached slowly, his steps measured and formal. When he reached me, he paused, something vulnerable in his expression I'd rarely seen before. May I? He asked quietly, offering his arm in the traditional way of our culture. Words failed me. I managed only a nod, afraid that speaking might break whatever spell had brought him here. As he took his place beside me, I noticed movement in the back row, my mother slipping into a seat, dabbing at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. Your grandmother can be very persuasive, my father whispered as we resumed walking. And very wise. Relief and joy washed through me in equal measure. I squeezed his arm, no words adequate for the moment. Jason beamed from the altar, understanding without explanation the significance of what was happening. When we reached the front, the officiant asked the traditional question, "Who gives this woman to be married?" My father's voice was steady as he answered, "Her mother, and I do." He placed my hand in Jason's, then added something I never thought I'd hear, the traditional blessing in our native language, words passed down through generations of my family. The ceremony proceeded in a dreamlike state. Jason and I exchanged the vows we had written, promising to honor each other's backgrounds while building something new together. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the garden erupted in applause that seemed to bridge cultures, generations, and misunderstandings. During the reception, I finally had a moment alone with my father. "What happened?" I asked, still processing their unexpected appearance. "What changed your mind?" "Not what." "Who?" He smiled faintly. "Your grandmother happened." "I don't understand." "After you and Jason left the hospital, she gave us quite the lecture." He looked almost amused at the memory. "She reminded us of our own wedding day. How her disapproval nearly cost her a relationship with you. She said she would not allow us to make the same mistake." "Just like that, you changed your mind?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. "Not just like that, no." He looked down at his hands. "We've been struggling with this for months. Your mother more than me, perhaps." He met my gaze directly. "When your grandmother's condition worsened this morning, she made us promise. She said life is too short for such stubbornness. That sometimes traditions must bend so families don't break." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "And you agreed?" We remembered how it felt to be young and in love, facing disapproval from those whose opinions mattered most. He hesitated. "I still have concerns, Sophia. Cultural differences in marriage are not easy to navigate. But..." He glanced across the room at Jason, who was chatting animatedly with an elderly relative. "He seems to be a good man who truly loves you. That is the foundation everything else can be built upon." Tears threatened to ruin my carefully applied makeup. "Thank you for being here," I managed. "It means everything." He cleared his throat, clearly emotional himself. "Your grandmother also gave me an ultimatum. She said if we didn't attend your wedding, she would remove us from her will." His lips twitched in an almost smile. Not that it mattered. We were already on our way when she said it. Across the reception hall, my mother had cautiously approached Jason and appeared to be engaged in actual conversation. The sight seemed miraculous after months of rejection and silence. Later, during the traditional father-daughter dance that I had assumed would be skipped, I finally asked the question that had been burning in my mind. "Why didn't you ever tell me about your own wedding?" "That grandma and grandpa disapproved." My father looked surprised. "She told you about that?" I nodded. "This morning. She said you and Mom married against their wishes. That grandpa refused to attend." He was quiet for several moments as we moved across the dance floor. "It was a different time," he finally said. "We came to this country wanting to give you a perfect image of our culture, our traditions. Perhaps we were afraid that if you knew we had once defied those traditions ourselves, I might follow your example." I finished for him. A rueful smile crossed his face. "Ironic, isn't it? In trying to protect our culture by hiding our own youthful rebellion, we may have pushed you further from it." "I'm not rejecting our heritage, Dad," I said gently. "I'm finding a way to honor it while building something new. Just like you and Mom did." He nodded slowly. "Your grandmother said something similar. She has always been the wisest among us." The evening continued with moments of awkwardness gradually giving way to genuine connection. My mother eventually relaxed enough to teach some of Jason's relatives a traditional dance from our homeland. Jason's father engaged my father in conversation that shifted from polite small talk to stories about their respective childhoods. The most surprising moment came during my father's speech, something I had not expected him to give. He stood somewhat stiffly, addressing the gathered guests with formal dignity. "When Sophia was born," he began, "I made a promise to protect her and guide her toward the best path in life." He paused, gathering himself. "What I failed to understand until recently is that the best path is not always the one I would have chosen. Sometimes it is one she must discover for herself." Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the crowd as he continued. Today, I have seen how Jason looks at my daughter. I have witnessed his respect for our traditions, even those he does not fully understand. My father turned to face us directly. In our culture, there is a saying, new branches strengthen the ancient tree. Today, our family tree grows stronger with a new branch. He raised his glass in a traditional toast, speaking the words in our native language before translating, "May your roots grow deep and your branches reach the sky." As glasses clinked around the room, Jason leaned close to whisper, "Your father's full of surprises today." "You have no idea," I replied, watching in amazement as my mother approached Jason's mother, the two women tentatively beginning a conversation. Later, as the reception was winding down, my mother pulled me aside. "There's something you should know," she said, her voice low. "Your grandmother's condition, it improved this afternoon." Hope surged through me. "Really? The doctors are sure?" She nodded. "They're calling it unexpected but significant. She was even sitting up when we left the hospital." A small smile touched her lips. "She made us promise to take pictures to show her tomorrow." "You're going back tomorrow?" I asked, hearing the real question beneath my words. Was this reconciliation going to continue beyond today? My mother's eyes softened with understanding. "We're all going back tomorrow. As a family." She touched the pendant at my throat, my grandmother's necklace. "She told me to tell you she's not ready to leave yet. She wants to meet her great-grandchildren someday." The implications of her words, family, future, healing, washed over me in a wave of emotion. I hugged my mother tightly, feeling her return the embrace with equal fervor. "I'm sorry it took us so long," she whispered against my hair. "Stubbornness runs in the family." "Along with strength and love," I added. "Those run in the family too." As Jason and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, my father approached with something in his hand, a small, ornately decorated box I recognized from my childhood. He pressed it into my palm. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this today. It has been in our family for 5 generations." Inside lay a delicate gold bracelet etched with symbols of prosperity and fertility. "But this is meant for the family matriarch," I said, understanding its significance. "Yes," he agreed. "And someday, you will pass it to your daughter or daughter-in-law, along with our stories." His eyes held mine. All of our stories, including how her parents once defied tradition to follow their hearts, and how her grandmother's wisdom helped heal a family rift. As we drove away amid a shower of flower petals, Jason reached for my hand, his thumb brushing over the ancient bracelet now circling my wrist. "So," he said with a smile, "not exactly the wedding day we planned." "No," I agreed, thinking of hospital rooms and family secrets, unexpected appearances, and grandmother's wisdom. It was infinitely better. The twist that no one, least of all me, could have predicted wasn't just my parents' sudden appearance at the wedding. It was the revelation that their own love story mirrored mine in ways I had never known. It was my grandmother's strategic intervention, using her illness as leverage to heal family wounds. It was the discovery that tradition wasn't a rigid set of rules, but a living, breathing entity that could bend without breaking, evolve without being lost. As we headed toward our honeymoon destination, I realized the real twist was that what had seemed like an ending, my parents calling my wedding an embarrassment, had actually been the beginning of a deeper understanding between generations. Sometimes the most powerful family traditions aren't the visible rituals, but the invisible patterns of forgiveness, growth, and love that repeat across generations, connecting us through time. 6 months after our wedding, I stood in the kitchen of our new home, carefully arranging traditional dishes alongside Jason's mother's famous apple pie. The dining table, extended to its full length, was set with a blend of items that told our story: my grandmother's embroidered table runner, wedding china from Jason's family, and hand-painted plates I had purchased on our honeymoon. "Need any help?" Jason appeared in the doorway, looking slightly nervous. It was our first time hosting both families for dinner, a milestone in our married life that felt both ordinary and monumental. "Just your calm presence," I admitted, checking the main dish for the 3rd time. "Do you think it's ready?" He peered into the pot, inhaling deeply. "Smells perfect. Just like your mom makes it." The doorbell rang before I could respond. "They're here," I whispered unnecessarily, suddenly feeling like a child again, desperate for parental approval. Jason squeezed my hand. "It's going to be great." They're family. Family. Such a simple word for such a complex reality. My parents arrived first, my father carrying a bottle of traditional spirits, my mother bearing a homemade dessert. The initial greetings were still somewhat formal, but lacked the tension of previous encounters. My mother immediately headed for the kitchen to inspect my cooking, while my father explored our living room, examining the photographs and mementos we had collected. "You've displayed the wedding portrait," he noted, indicating the large framed photograph on our mantel. The four parents gathered around Jason and me, an image of unity that had seemed impossible just hours before it was taken. "It's my favorite picture," I said honestly. He nodded, something softening in his expression. "Mine too." Jason's parents arrived minutes later, his mother Caroline embracing me warmly, while his father Robert clapped Jason on the back before offering my father a hearty handshake. 6 months ago, these interactions would have been unimaginably awkward. Now they felt almost natural, not entirely comfortable yet, but evolving. As we settled around the table, I marveled at the scene before me. My father and Robert discussing recent sports events. My mother and Caroline comparing notes on recipes. Jason catching my eye across the table, his smile reflecting my own wonder. "So," my father said during a lull in conversation, "Jason tells me you're considering starting your own marketing consultancy." I nearly choked on my water, surprised he knew about the idea I'd only recently begun exploring. "It's just a thought at this stage," I said cautiously. "Your mother was an entrepreneur before we came to this country," he continued, surprising me again. This was a part of her history I'd never heard. She had quite the business sense. My mother looked embarrassed, but pleased by the recognition. "It was a small shop, nothing special." "She's being modest," my father insisted. "She built it from nothing. Had 5 employees by the time we decided to emigrate." He turned to Jason's parents. "That's where Sophia gets her business mind. Not from me. I've always been better with technical things." The casual acknowledgement of my inherited traits, and the pride with which he claimed them, felt like a gift. For so long, I had seen my parents as unified in their traditions and expectations, not as individuals with unique histories and talents that had shaped me in different ways. "I didn't know that, Mom," I said quietly. She shrugged, looking somewhat uncomfortable with the attention. "It was another life. But yes, I understand your desire to build something of your own." A small smile played at her lips. "Perhaps I could offer some advice, if you would like." "I'd love that," I said, meaning it completely. The conversation flowed more easily after that, weaving between plans for the future and stories from the past. When dessert was served, a hybrid creation featuring elements from both cultural traditions, Jason tapped his glass gently. "We actually have some news we'd like to share," he began, glancing at me for confirmation. We had discussed waiting longer to make the announcement, but the moment felt right. I nodded, suddenly nervous again. "We wanted you all to be the first to know." I took a deep breath. "We're expecting a baby. In about 7 months." The table erupted in exclamations of joy. Caroline immediately began crying happy tears while Robert beamed proudly. My mother clasped her hands together in delight. But it was my father's reaction that surprised me most. He rose from his chair, came around the table, and embraced me fully, something he had rarely done even when I was a child. "A grandchild," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "What a blessing." Later, as the initial excitement settled into happy discussion of baby preparations, my father cleared his throat. "We have been thinking," he said, glancing at my mother for confirmation. "The room above our garage, we could convert it into a nursery. For when you visit. Or if you need help with the baby." The offer, practical and emotional at once, nearly brought me to tears. "That would be wonderful," I managed. And my mother added, "I would like to teach the baby our language. If that's all right with you both." "We were hoping you would," Jason said without hesitation. "We want our child to know both sides of their heritage." My mother nodded, visibly moved. "I will start collecting the children's books I used to read to you, Sophia. And the traditional lullabies." I have some family recipes to contribute to, Caroline offered. Though I'd love to learn some of your traditional dishes as well, she added, addressing my mother directly. We could cook together sometime, my mother suggested, surprising me again with this overture of friendship. As the evening continued, I excused myself briefly, needing a moment alone to absorb the significance of what was happening. In our bedroom, I took out my phone and opened the photo I had taken yesterday, my grandmother sitting up in her recliner at home, remarkable recovered from her health crisis, surrounded by her cherished possessions. We had visited her weekly since the wedding, sometimes with my parents, sometimes just Jason and me. Each visit revealed more family stories, more wisdom, more connections between past and present. She had been right about so many things, not least her prediction that my parents would eventually come around. "Everything okay?" Jason asked, appearing in the doorway. I showed him the photo. "Just thinking about how much has changed in 6 months. How close we came to a very different outcome." He sat beside me on the edge of the bed. "Your grandmother knew what she was doing with that hospital drama. Strategic genius, that woman." I laughed. "She denies it completely. Says she really was at death's door. Convenient timing though," he teased. "The thing is," I said more seriously, "I think she might have saved more than our wedding day. She saved my relationship with my parents. And maybe helped them heal some old wounds of their own." Jason nodded thoughtfully. Family patterns are powerful things. Sometimes it takes someone with the perspective of another generation to see them clearly. "Speaking of generations," I said, placing a hand on my still flat stomach, "what do you think this little one will make of their complicated family heritage?" "I think," Jason said, covering my hand with his, "they'll be incredibly lucky to grow up surrounded by so many different traditions, stories, and perspectives. They'll have your mother teaching them your language, and my dad showing them how to fish. Your father explaining cultural symbols, and my mom baking pies with them." He smiled. "And your grandmother telling them how she orchestrated their parents' wedding day drama." I leaned against his shoulder, taking comfort in his optimism. "It won't always be this easy. We'll hit rough patches. Cultural differences that seem charming now might become friction points later." "Probably," he agreed readily. "But we've already navigated one of the hardest parts, bringing the families together. And we've got your grandmother's wisdom to guide us." Standing firm for what matters while remaining open to change, I said, recalling one of her frequent sayings. When we returned to the dining room, the conversation had evolved into animated planning for the baby's future. My father was describing traditional first-year celebrations while Jason's mother suggested contemporary alternatives. Rather than arguing, they seemed to be finding ways to incorporate both approaches. "The child will have such richness," my mother observed, noticing my return. "2 cultures, 2 languages, 2 sets of traditions. And 4 grandparents who clearly plan to spoil them rotten," I added with a smile. "5, counting your grandmother," my father corrected. "She's already talking about which heirlooms to pass down." As the evening wound to a close, I found myself standing between my mother and Caroline as we rinsed dishes, the 3 of us working in companionable rhythm. "I never thought we'd be here," I admitted quietly. "There were moments I feared I'd lost you both forever." My mother paused, hands still in the soapy water. "I feared the same," she confessed. "That our stubbornness would cost us our only child." Caroline placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Families are resilient things. Sometimes they bend almost to breaking, but with love and effort, they can heal stronger than before." "Like bones," my mother said unexpectedly, drawing surprised looks from both of us. She smiled faintly. "My mother told me that once, after a family argument when I was young. That family bonds can break but heal stronger, like bones." "Grandmother and her wisdom," I said, shaking my head in wonder. Always the right words at the right time. 2 weeks later, we visited my grandmother in her apartment, now fully recovered and determined to remain independent despite my parents' insistence she move in with them. She sat regally in her favorite chair as we shared the news about the baby. Her eyes lit up with joy. The next generation arrives. This is good timing." "You can't take credit for this one, Grandma," I teased. "This wasn't part of your hospital bed scheming." She laughed, the sound remarkably youthful despite her age. Who says I can't? Perhaps this was my plan all along. Jason played along. The long game, eh? Orchestrating great-grandchildren. A woman must think ahead, she replied with a wink. Now, tell me how your parents received the news. As we recounted the family dinner, her expression grew increasingly satisfied. So they are truly coming together now. The wounds are healing. Thanks to you, I said earnestly. If you hadn't intervened. She waved away my gratitude. I merely reminded them of what they already knew but had forgotten. That love matters more than pride. That family is not about perfect agreement, but perfect acceptance. Well, I wouldn't call it perfect yet, Jason admitted. There are still awkward moments. Of course, my grandmother nodded. Healing takes time. The scar remains, but the pain fades. She leaned forward, suddenly serious. Remember this when you face your own challenges as parents. You will make mistakes. You will disagree about traditions and methods. What matters is not avoiding the conflicts, but how you heal from them. Her words stayed with me as the months passed and my pregnancy progressed. Our families continued their cautious, but steadily warming dance of integration. My mother and Caroline went shopping for baby items together, debating the merits of traditional versus modern approaches to child rearing. My father and Robert collaborated on converting our spare room into a nursery, incorporating symbolic elements from both cultures into the decor. When our daughter Liliana was born on a crisp spring morning, both sets of grandparents crowded the hospital waiting room, differences temporarily forgotten in their shared excitement. My grandmother arrived shortly after, moving slowly but determinedly, bearing a small package wrapped in heirloom cloth. For the newest branch of our family tree, she announced, placing it in my hands as she gazed adoringly at the newborn in my arms. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet sized for an infant's wrist, engraved with symbols from our cultural heritage alongside a newly added symbol, one representing Lily's American roots through Jason's family. Something old, something new, my grandmother explained. Like your family. As I looked around the hospital room, Jason beaming with pride, our parents cooing over the baby, my grandmother watching it all with satisfied wisdom, I realized we had created something precious and rare, a family bridging cultures, generations, and misunderstandings through the simple but profound power of love and acceptance. The journey hadn't been easy. There would be challenges ahead as we navigated raising a child with multiple cultural identities. But we had built a foundation strong enough to weather the storms. My grandmother caught my eye across the room and nodded once, as if reading my thoughts. In that moment, I understood the most important lesson of all. Family isn't something we inherit completely formed and unchangeable. It's something we actively create every day through our choices, our forgiveness, and our willingness to grow together. So what about you? Have you ever faced a cultural clash within your family? How did you navigate those challenging waters? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family rifts can heal, that traditions can evolve without being lost, and that love truly can bridge the deepest divides. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful twist in your story is the one you never saw coming.